two people already filming from like two different angles, and these dudes slowly started to create this like sort of surrounding barrier around me to like kind of close me in.
Yeah.
And what happened, they attacked at the right time because like there was a wall like this.
Boxing is a dirty business. It's a dirty sport. I mean, there's always one judge that's in the bag, it seems.
Right.
At the very least, if they're not absolutely paid off, at the very least, they're deeply indebted to the promoters.
You know, but me, I'm gonna speak my mind. I'm just gonna keep it 100, man. Jake Paul is fugazi. He's fake.
That's how you feel?
Truly feel. I'll bust him up and his.
This didn't break slowly. It snapped. 1 minute, Jake Paul was flexing, tweeting, and playing undefeated internet boxing emperor. The next minute, his name was flying across timelines next to words like feds, investigation, and why is everyone suddenly quiet? And when Joe Rogan and Anthony Joshua allegedly started dropping details, not opinions, not jokes, but details, the internet did that thing where it leans back and whispers, "Oh, this is different." Because beef is normal. Trash talk is expected. But when two of the most respected voices in combat sports start hinting that something isn't right behind the curtain, it stops feeling like drama and starts feeling like a leak. The kind of leak that doesn't come with a mop. The kind that floods the house. Jake didn't deny immediately. He didn't laugh it off. He didn't post through it. And in internet culture, silence is never just silence. It's either panic, strategy, or someone getting advice from very expensive lawyers. Suddenly, fans weren't asking who Jake was fighting next. They were asking who might be knocking next. Let's rewind this properly, because this story didn't start with sirens, subpoenas, or panic tweets. It started with a shift in tone. The kind of shift you only notice if you've been watching closely. Jake Paul has always thrived in noise. He punches controversy like a speed bag, bounces off backlash, and turns criticism into cash. Chaos is his comfort zone. So when the noise around him suddenly changed flavor, people felt it before they understood it. For years, Jake built his boxing empire like a content factory disguised as a sport. Carefully chosen opponents, perfectly timed beef, viral moments, stitched together with pay-per-view numbers. Critics screamed circus, fans screamed genius, and Jake smiled all the way to the bank. He didn't hide the game. He bragged about it. That confidence was part of the brand. But then the whispers started creeping in. Not loud accusations, not dramatic call-outs. Subtle comments, pauses, side remarks that felt heavier than they should have. Joe Rogan, who usually treats influence, boxing like a novelty act with gloves, reportedly shifted gears. His skepticism stopped sounding playful and started sounding cautious. Less "this is funny" and more "this doesn't add up." And when someone like Rogan slows down mid-sentence and chooses his words carefully, people lean in. Because Rogan doesn't need clout. He doesn't need beef. If he's hinting, it's usually because he's heard something that made him stop. Laughing then, Anthony Joshua entered the conversation and the internet's mood changed instantly. Joshua doesn't orbit drama. He doesn't chase headlines. He doesn't casually stir the pot. When his name became attached to the discussion, it felt like a different weight class entirely. His comments weren't explosive, but they were deliberate, measured. The kind of remarks that suggest he's reacting to information, not rumors. That's when fans stopped scrolling and started rewatching. Old clips resurfaced where Jake Scrooging talked about controlling everything. Interviews where he hinted at knowing how to make fights work. At the time, it sounded like confidence. Now it sounded like someone saying too much without realizing how it would age. In hindsight, confidence can look a lot like exposure. And then the word everyone fears showed up in whispers. Feds. Not officially, not in court documents. In conversations, online speculation, anonymous posts, the kind that spreads because it scares people, not because it's proven. But here's the thing about that word. Once it's said, changes how every move gets interpreted. Jake's behavior suddenly felt off script. The non-stop posting slowed. The trolling stopped. The energy shifted from loud dominance to calculated restraint. For a guy who usually responds to criticism with 10 posts and a meme, this quiet wasn't maturity. It felt like someone being advised to shut up. Fans noticed immediately. The internet started asking questions Jake never had to answer before. Why isn't he clapping back? Why isn't he joking this away? Why does every post feel pre-scheduled? Silence became suspicious. Calm looked staged. Every move felt rehearsed, and the speculation snowballed. People started connecting dots that had never mattered before. Promotional deals, fight contracts, betting conversations. Who controlled what? Who signed where? Who benefited how? The ecosystem. Around influencer boxing suddenly looked less like entertainment and more like a maze of money trails people wanted to follow. Rogan's alleged comments were replayed endlessly. Every "I can't really say much" became a flashing red light. Every "there's more going on" sounded like a warning wrapped in diplomacy. And Joshua's refusal to dismiss the conversation outright made it worse. Because dismissal would have killed the story. Caution kept it alive. Meanwhile, Jake's inner circle went quiet too. No playful defense, no aggressive denial, no mocking response videos. Just nothing. That vacuum invited theories, and the internet filled it fast. Some fans insisted this was a coordinated takedown. Others said this was the cost of trying to rewrite a sport without respecting its rules. Both sides agreed on one thing. Something felt different. This wasn't a normal Jake Paul controversy. Normally, Jake controls the narrative by turning it into content. This time, the narrative felt like it was controlling him. That's a dangerous reversal. Because when you lose control of the story, you lose the ability to spin it. People started revisiting every past accusation with fresh suspicion. Claims about scripted outcomes, whispers about favorable matchmaking, rumors about behind the scenes. Leverage, none of it new, but all of it louder now, because context had changed. And context is everything. Jake built his rise on bending the system. The problem is, bending looks a lot like breaking when authorities start paying attention. Even the suggestion of that attention can rattle sponsors, promoters, and partners who hate unpredictability more than controversy. The first wave of reaction wasn't anger, it was anxiety. Fans asked if fights would be delayed, if announcements would quietly disappear, partnerships would suddenly mutually end. When business starts moving in silence, people assume damage control is happening somewhere off camera. Jake didn't address the rumors directly. That choice alone shaped the story. A denial might have sparked a debate. Silence let imagination run wild. And imagination online is undefeated by the end of this phase. The internet wasn't asking if Jake Paul could box. They were asking what exactly he'd built, how he'd built it, and whether the spotlight that made him famous was now aimed a little too close for comfort. Because when respected voices stop joking and start choosing words carefully, it's usually not for entertainment. This is where paranoia clocked in for a full shift. Because once the internet decided something felt off, it stopped asking questions and started writing conclusions. The tone flipped from curiosity to conviction. Suddenly, everyone wasn't wondering if something was happening. They were debating how bad it was. Memes hit first, because memes are how panic dresses itself up as humor. Edits of Jake Paul pacing, fake lawyer on speed dial jokes. Clips slowed down to dramatic music like this was a true crime trailer. People joked about alleged spreadsheets, alleged contracts, and alleged phone calls. The same way they joke when they're half serious and fully entertained. Then the reaction videos poured in. Creators who defended Jake for years started hedging, not attacking him, not accusing him, but shifting language. If this is true, I don't know what's really going on. I hope this gets cleared up. That change mattered. When supporters stop speaking in absolutes, the audience smells blood in the water. Meanwhile, critics felt validated. Old accusations resurfaced with new confidence. Claims about hand-picked opponents suddenly sounded less like jealousy and more like a pattern. Conversations about control took on darker undertones. People weren't talking about branding anymore. They were talking about systems, and systems attract attention. Celebrity reactions escalated the chaos without naming names. Fighters posted about integrity. Promoters tweeted about respecting the sport. Influencers shared vague warnings about not confusing hype with legitimacy. Each post felt like a wink. Each wink fueled another theory. Nobody wanted to say it directly, but everybody wanted credit for being early. Jake's silence stayed intact. That silence became the loudest voice in the room. Every hour without a statement felt intentional, strategic, legal. Theories spread that he'd been advised not to speak. Others claimed he was waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, the lack of engagement turned the internet into a pressure cooker with no release valve. Fans started monitoring patterns. Posting schedules, deleted content, who unfollowed who stopped liking posts. Social media turned into surveillance, and every micro-movement got magnified into meaning. Someone unfollowing someone else became damage control. A postponed announcement became trouble behind the scenes. Then came the money talk. Speculation about finances exploded. Not personal spending, but operations, promotions, pay-per-view splits, where money flowed and who controlled it. The word oversight started popping up. The word regulation followed. People who had never cared about boxing rules suddenly became experts in governance. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Jake built his brand on disrupting the sport. Now, people were wondering if disruption had crossed into something. Regulators don't laugh about. At the same time, defenders pushed back hard. They accused critics of jealousy, fear, and clout chasing. They argued that anytime someone breaks a system, the system fights back. That narrative caught traction too. David versus Goliath energy always sells. Even when the David owns multiple mansions, the internet split again. One side framed Jake as a victim of success. The other framed him as someone who flew too close to the sun while live streaming The View. Both sides agreed on one thing. This wasn't normal influencer drama anymore. This felt institutional, and that feeling changed how jokes landed. Suddenly, the humor got nervous. Laughs came with disclaimers. If true, allegedly. People started protecting themselves linguistically, which is always a sign the mood has shifted. When sarcasm puts on a seatbelt, something's coming. More clips of Rogan-style conversations circulated, not because they confirmed anything, but because they suggested restraint. The pauses, the careful phrasing, the refusal to elaborate. In internet culture, refusal reads as confirmation, even when it ISNs single quotes. Then the outrage phase arrived. People demanded answers. They tagged accounts. They flooded comment sections with the same question repeated 1,000 ways. What's really going on? That pressure didn't just aim at Jake. It aimed at the entire influencer boxing ecosystem. Promoters got dragged. Fighters got questioned. Anyone adjacent felt heat. Sponsors hate heat. Brands thrive on predictability. And this situation screamed unpredictability. Fans noticed subtle changes. Ads disappeared. Partnerships stopped being highlighted. Silence spread beyond Jake's circle. When multiple people stopped talking at once, The internet assumes coordination. Conspiracy. Theories blossomed like weeds. Some claimed this was retaliation for breaking traditional power structures. Others suggested internal betrayals. A few went full cinematic, talking about secret meetings and sealed documents. None of it confirmed, all of it consumed. Because when clarity is missing, imagination fills the gap. What made this stage dangerous wasn't the accusations. It was the erosion of trust. Once trust starts cracking, even innocent actions look suspicious. Jake posting a gym photo. Distraction. Jake promoting a product. Deflection. Jake not posting. Legal advice. There was no neutral ground left. And then came the countdown mentality. People started acting like something was about to drop. A report, a statement, a bombshell. The internet loves anticipation more than facts. Every refresh felt like waiting for an alert. Creators teased big. Updates coming. Timelines stayed on edge. Jake's brand, built on control and confidence, now felt reactive. Even if nothing official existed, the perception alone reshaped the narrative. Perception is currency online, and Jake's currency was fluctuating wildly by the end of this phase. The conversation had outgrown him. This wasn't about Jake Paul anymore. It was about what happens when entertainment blurs into enterprise, and enterprise attracts scrutiny. It was about whether influencer-driven industries can outrun the rules forever. It was about whether the spotlight that makes you famous eventually becomes a microscope. The internet sensed consequences approaching.
Because it had proof.
But because momentum doesn't slow itself by the time the noise reached this stage. The damage wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was structural, not the kind you patch with a statement or a tweet thread, but the kind that changes how every future move gets interpreted. Jake Paul didn't lose his audience overnight. He lost certainty, and in a brand built on confidence. Certainty is the load-bearing wall. The immediate aftermath wasn't dramatic. There were no flashing lights, no public knock on the door, no cinematic takedown. Instead, there was something far worse for a personality-driven empire. There was hesitation. Hesitation from fans. Hesitation from partners. Hesitation from people who used to move fast when his name came up. That pause spoke louder than any accusation ever could. Because once people start asking quiet questions behind closed doors, the public show doesn't matter as much anymore. Jake's image shifted in subtle but significant ways. The swagger that once read as fearless began to read as forced. The bravado felt rehearsed. Even neutral content attracted sighs. Every flex was met with skepticism. Every announcement was scanned for subtext. The audience that once cheered now analyzed, and analysis kills illusion. Meanwhile, the boxing conversation around him changed tone completely. Instead of debating skill or matchups, people debated legitimacy. Not whether he could fight, but whether the environment around his fights was built on solid ground. That's a dangerous pivot. Skill arguments fade. Legitimacy questions linger. Those questions didn't just affect him. They rippled outward. Fighters connected to the same ecosystem started getting pulled into conversations they never asked for. Promoters faced scrutiny. Fans demanded transparency from places that were never designed to offer it. The entire influencer. Boxing space suddenly felt like it was standing under a spotlight that wasn't meant for entertainment, and that's when reality set in. Entertainment thrives on chaos. Institutions do not. Jake's silence during this phase felt intentional, but it also felt limiting. He couldn't clap back without escalating. He couldn't joke without looking dismissive. He couldn't over-explain without inviting deeper scrutiny. Every option carried risk. That's what happens when control slips. The chessboard gets smaller. Public perception hardened into two camps, and neither was comfortable. One side insisted this was all smoke, exaggerated by jealous critics and bored internet sleuths. The other side argued that smoke doesn't appear without heat, and where there's heat, something eventually burns. The middle ground evaporated, and brands don't live in extremes. They live in safety. That's where the long-term consequences began to take shape. When uncertainty enters the room, money backs away quietly. Not loudly, quietly, deals stall. Opportunities need more time. Calls don't get returned as fast. No one announces the distance, but it's felt. Jake built his rise by being unavoidable. Now, avoidance became the strategy around him. At the same time, the public learned something uncomfortable about power. Influence doesn't shield you from scrutiny forever. In fact, it invites it. The bigger the disruption, the more attention it attracts from places that don't care about views or engagement. They care about structure, and structure doesn't bend easily. The internet's role in all of this became impossible to ignore. Fans realized how quickly they flip from audience to investigators, how speculation becomes pressure, how narratives solidify without confirmation. The same system that lifted Jake amplified the fear around him. That duality is the cost of digital fame. Jake's future now exists under a cloud of what if. What if nothing happens? What if this all blows over? Even then, the stain remains. Because once doubt enters the public mind, it doesn't leave cleanly. It shows up in jokes, in comments, in comparisons. In every future controversy, no matter how unrelated, and there will be future controversies. That part is inevitable. The difference now is that the margin for error is gone. Every move will be weighed against this moment. Every silence will be read as strategy. Every win will be questioned. Every loss will be magnified. That's the price of being the center of a story that felt bigger than entertainment. The most telling part of this entire saga wasn't what was said. It was how people reacted to what wasn't said. When respected voices choose restraint. When insiders hint instead of shout. When institutions stay quiet instead of denying. That combination creates a gravity you can't joke your way out of. Jake Paul's story isn't over, not even close, but it has entered a new chapter. One where spectacle alone isn't enough. One where credibility matters more than clout. One where control isn't assumed. And whether this ends with vindication, consequences, or something in between, the impact is already locked in. The conversation has changed. The tone has shifted. The audience is no longer just watching for entertainment. They're watching for outcomes. Because when fame grows faster than structure, eventually the structure gets questioned. And when that happens, silence isn't neutral. Now let's pause for half a second, because if you think this was just another loud internet rumor, you're already behind. Stories like this don't come with credits rolling or neat explanations. They linger, they mutate, and then they resurface when nobody's ready. That's how this game works. This is why you're here. While other channels skim headlines and play it safe, punch-press digs where the silence gets uncomfortable. We don't just repeat what's trending, we break down why it's trending. Who benefits from the noise and who suddenly stopped talking when things got serious. Because the quiet moments. That's where the real story hides, so smash that like button like it just promised transparency and delivered excuses. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is really happening here. Is this all smoke? Is something brewing behind the scenes? Or is this the moment influencer boxing finally runs into a wall it can't punch through? Say it with your chest. The comment section is where the real cross-examination happens. And if you're still watching without subscribing, don't play yourself. Hit subscribe right now. Scandals don't give warnings, and when the next bombshell drops, you'll want front row seats. not a recap from someone who got there late. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the moment's silence, breaks, and answers. Start slipping out sideways, because around here, stories don't disappear, they evolve. This is Punch Press, where hype meets heat, and every headline gets tested.